Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's WEConnect International webinar. My name is Maggie Berry, and I'm the Executive Director for WEConnect International here in Europe. And I'm delighted that you've joined us for today's webinar, How to Talk Like a TEDx Speaker. Our presenter today is Adda Zanden, an actress in an international theatre group, which is currently touring Europe with Shakespeare's Women, a play about the power of women in both Shakespeare's and in modern times. Adda is also the founder of Stage Presence for Business, and with this company, she brings acting techniques to the business world. In today's session, we're going to be learning about how you can craft your story, how to structure a TED Talk, how to use neuroscience to connect with your audience, and how to apply to speak at a TEDx event. To keep background noise to minimum, participants will all be on mute, so please do use the chat functionality to ask any questions that you might have. And there'll be time for discussion and questions at the end. Adda's probably going to talk for about 40 to 45 minutes, and the session is being recorded, so you will be able to listen back to it again. So Adda, thank you so much for presenting for us. It's over to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Maggie, for your wonderful introduction, and thank you all for joining me at this webinar. I'm super excited to host this webinar on how to talk like a TEDx speaker. And let me tell you what we are going to do today. I'm giving you some brief information about what is a TED and a TEDx event, some strategy advice on how to get in an event, where we'll look at storytelling structure, and I'm going to tell you something about presentation skills. So please move on with the slides. Thank you, Maggie. Of course, first I will introduce myself. I'm a speaker coach at TEDx Binnenhof, which is TEDx the Knights Hall, now also known as Ideas from Europe. I'm a TEDx speaker coach at TEDx Delft. I work for MPI the Netherlands. I'm also quite active as a keynote speaker lately, for instance, at the Women in Leadership Economic Forum in Dubai, where I was last year. And I also work as the Ministry of Infrastructure, also called as LEF. As Maggie said already, I'm an actress touring Europe with the play Shakespeare's Women, and as such, I'm part of the theatre company Theatre of Eternal Values. Next slide, please. Here you see me hosting a masterclass about TEDx speakers at the next women event that is in Amsterdam, and I want to ask you a question, so maybe you can please share that in the chat box. I want to ask you if you have already some experience as a public speaker. Just share that with us, because that's nice to know where you stand as well. Next slide, please. So first we will dive into what is TED. Well, as you see here, TED says ideas worth spreading. Maybe a bit about the history, and maybe you don't know that TED started off in 1984 as a conference only on technology, entertainment, and design. And you know what? It was not even successful this first time. So they waited another 6 years until 1990 before it became successful and before it became this viral video phenomenon and a worldwide community of passionate people. So what is actually the difference between a TED event and a TEDx event? Well, a TED event is a big international event, and usually the speakers are renowned personalities and really experts in their field. And the ideas that they are sharing are the best, innovative, and influential ideas. But a TEDx event is different. It is a more independent and more locally event. And here it's all about actually personal experiences and ideas that bring positive change. So it's actually also not about professional speakers. No, it is about just ordinary people with an idea. Next slide, please. Now, how to become a TEDx speaker? Is it an impossible dream to become, you know, really on the stage like Al Gore or Anthony Robbins? Or can you also just follow a strategy? Next slide. I'll give you now a 5-step strategy on how to get in a TEDx event, because it is not rocket science. It's just logical thinking, and there is actually a very good way on how to get in a TEDx event. A TED event is usually by invite only, but a TEDx event you can also apply, and that is not what a lot of people know. So first, you have to start by researching future TEDx events, and it's not about, you know, like next week or something, because by the time you're reading about an upcoming TEDx event in a newspaper, it is already too late to get in as a speaker. It is really look really well in advance, at least a month and maybe even 6 months or a year. And if you want to find upcoming events, you can visit the TEDx event page to find out who's running a program at least several months in the future. Now, what is also important is to understand the nature of TEDx. TEDx is really all about sharing ideas, and that means that it's not about selling yourself or selling your business. It is not about promoting your business. It is really on focusing on how your story can add value to others. And also really look into why or if you are the right person to tell that. Also, it is all voluntary. So that means that they are not allowed to pay any speakers. So it is also good to look into events in your own area, because they will also not be able to pay your expenses. Now, investigate the application process. Sometimes there are events and they really have, on their website, they have an application form. So that's easy to find. But also realize that even if they don't really have an application form, that you can still apply. Everybody can write and send a proposal. But the secret is making sure that your application stands out. So it's all about explaining your idea, why is it new, and why you are the right person. And in this webinar, you will also get some advice on that, and you will learn how to focus on that idea and how can you make yourself stand out. What is also important is respect the theme. Most of the TEDx events, they have a theme. Not all of them, but most of them have. So it is very good to, of course, apply to those TEDx events that have a theme that is somehow relevant to what you're telling, to your story. But also you can mold your own story in the direction of the theme. It's not always that obvious. For instance, one of the TEDx events in Somerville near Boston was movement. Now, that can be interpreted very broadly. They, for instance, had performers and speakers, including aerial dancers, an urban planner, a nutrition expert, and a non-profit advocate whose group taught basketball to children in India. So you see, you have a very broad perspective, but really respect the theme. Another important thing is make yourself findable. Of course, you can apply, but how fun it would be if they could find you as a speaker. The organizers of TEDx events are really interested in discovering people and reveal new speakers to their audience. So if you want to be found, you have to be out there. You have to share your ideas through blogging, through tweeting, to speaking to other groups. All that makes it more easy for TEDx event organizers to find you. Next slide, please. So as I said, and as you can also see on the website of TED, it's all about a great, well-formed idea. Now, this looks like, whoa, what is that? Now, what TED says is something that is new and surprising, an idea or an invention that your audience has never heard about, or a great basic idea that your audience maybe already heard, but with a compelling new argument behind it that challenges beliefs and perspectives. So you might think, oh my gosh, how will I ever get into that? Because I don't have such a wonderful, great idea. I'm just very ordinary. Or how to find your new perspective on that idea. Next slide. It's all about what your message, the impact that your message will have on an audience. So don't think about these ideas as that it has to be such a big thing. No, it's really the impact that you have, the impact that, why are you different? That impact, that is what they are looking for. And I'll talk to you later about how you can find that specific message that you probably have. But first, I want to share with you the next slide. So it's about how your story can add value to others. Just look into that. Focus on how your story can add value to others and why you are the right person to tell. And that is something that Todd Lombardo of the TEDx Somerville says and where he really stands for. So it's about stories. Next slide, please. Because stories stick. Stories are the glue that makes the whole speech hold together. It is something that really sticks to our brain. With stories, you make the connection to your audience because facts and figures, of course, they're all really important, but what really sticks in the brain of the people, what really stays with us is the story that you're telling. And storytelling is also how neuroscience works. I will tell you about that later. Just want to explain to you first why stories are that important and how to craft a story. Next slide. How to craft your story. That's what we're going to look at it now. Be aware that people do not care what you know until they know that you care. It's all about that they understand why is it important for you. Because if it's important for you, then your audience can also relate to it. Then it becomes also important for them. So go back and looking, what is your why? Why is what you're telling? Why is your topic? Why did you start your business? Why are you at that point of your life where you are now? What happened? What is your why? What was or what is your pivotal moment? Can you go back to that? And could you share that with people? Could you share that with an audience? So let me go to a storytelling technique. Next slide. Maggie, thank you. And one of the most famous storytelling structure, maybe you heard already about it, is the hero's journey. The hero's journey is all about a hero, a very ordinary person, or an ordinary hobbit, just going on a quest. So the structure is like this. at first, the hero is very happy where he is. For instance, if we look indeed at the example of the Lord of the Rings, Frodo. Frodo was totally happy where he was, and he had no intention on going on a journey. But somehow he found out that he had to. Somehow he had to find out that there was a call to action. Now, the hero can be you. Please make it very personal. But it can also be your business. It can also be your brand. Look at it from that perspective. So in order for the hero to be somebody we can relate to, you first describe the hero as a storytelling. We are now talking about storytelling techniques. So you start off with describing yourself or your business as a hero. Make it somebody that we can relate to. So like a human being. Make it easy for us to identify. So it's, tell something about your ordinary life, what happened, where you stand for, what is your outlook on life. And then you find out, maybe in your life or maybe in your business, that there was something that you got a kind of a call to action. And that call to action does not have to be that dramatic as in the movies, like a gunshot or something like that, but could be simply be a phone call or a conversation, but it manifests itself in such a way that it disrupts your comfort. You feel that there is something that needs to change. The only thing is, you don't really want to change. You're so nicely where you are. So you need a little extra time. And what often happens there is you meet a mentor. So if you go back to the story of the Hobbit, of Frodo, who's nicely sitting in his little thingy where he and all the hobbits live, there appears Gandalf. And Gandalf understands, gives him the tools and gives him the confidence, gives him the advice that make Frodo go along on his quest. Now, if you look in your own life, is there a mentor? Is there a figure who is important in giving you the insight? And maybe it can be practical training, it can be some advice, but look into that. So my invitation to you is to go back to the beginning of my storytelling about the hero. Is where does that start for you? Now, if you are live on this webinar, you might want to only think about it. But if you later on listen to this recording, you might even press it on pause and just write it down for yourself. Okay, where was I? What was important there? Where was I? And what made me go on that journey? What was my mentor? And that mentor does not need to be a person. It can even be a movie. It can even be something that you have read. Look at that. So the most simple way of looking at the starting of your speech for TEDx, because TEDx is always very personal, is that you find out what was important for you, what happened, what made you go on that quest, what made you go on that journey that gave you so much insight. Because on some point in the storytelling world, in the fairy tale world, in the movie world, they find a treasure, they find the princess, or they get to the sword. If you go back to our hero's journey, that might be a spiritual insight. It might be an insight that gained you a total different position in life, maybe you started off a business, something like that. So the challenge or the invitation that I have for you, look at that, because that makes your story, your message that you have to tell, something that we can relate to as an audience, because we feel with the hero. What movies do is that they make you also cry when something really bad happens to the hero. And that's what we want to do in these stories as well. It works like neuroscience. We really, the mirror neurons start to work because we feel with you. We are actually on your journey as well. So that is according to what I want to share with you for now. That's a storytelling technique that I want to give you right now, that you can always use, that you can use in every speech, in every performance, in every public speaking gig. Look at yourself, look at the message that you want to give from this perspective. How did you start? What was your why? What was your pivotal moment? Next slide. Having said that, we go to the grammar of body language. And you see here a picture of Mark Zuckerberg. And why have I chosen him? Not because I'm such a fan of Mark Zuckerberg, but because he just, stands there in such a confident way, and you really can see that he is engaged himself. And because he is engaged himself, he is engaging the audience. So if we look at body language, which is of course a very important thing to engage to the audience with, it's a very important thing to use, see it as a tool. So what we look at is body posture, how to use your hands. Now you see what this guy, or Mark, is doing. He is using his whole body. He's using his hands to tell his story. What I often notice as a speaker coach is that speakers start off as a talking head, so to say. So they have their whole story only in their head, in their mind. And their body is not part of their story, which is a pity, because it does not help yourself, but it also does not help your audience to feel engaged, and does not help yourself. What I mean with that is, if you manage to have your whole body engaged in what you say, it's much more easy also to remember your story, because your whole body works as a memory, and you can underline with your hands what you say. Also, what is important is, where do you stand on stage? So for instance, with TEDx, you usually have this red dot where you stand in, but it can be a really big red dot. For instance, this year at the TEDx Delft event, we have a red dot that is 3 meters in long and 3 meters wide. So that means you have some freedom to walk about and to move a bit. Now, what we always say is that if you have something personal to tell, come a bit more forward to the audience, to really imbibe them and make them part of your personal story. And what then also happens, if you come more forward, I already do that a little bit, is that you can speak a bit more soft. So also use your voice in that. If you come more close, you're a bit more personal, your voice can be more soft. And then when you have a bit more of a formal thing to say, or you want to relate that to some facts and figures, which is also important at a TEDx talk, then you can move back again. So that's a very good way in connecting to the audience. Come forward, speak softly, and change that also. Make some see it as a choreography. So that means that you can speak louder at some parts, softer at other parts. You can move, can walk about, but don't walk all the time. And also don't stand still all the time. That's why I'm saying see it as a choreography, like a dance. Make decisions, make choices, but make clear choices. So what moment do I stand and where do I choose to walk? And find these natural moments. What I always say, if in your story you go somewhere, really walk to another part of the stage, of another part of your red big dot. And where you end up, there you tell the story about this next part where you were. And if you go back in your story to this first place, or you move to another place in your story, then really make that physical. Show that on stage. Make it physical. You walk to another part of the stage, and your audience follows the story much easier because they understand, oh, now he is somewhere else. Now she is somewhere else. Another great advice that I want to give you is when you walk, don't talk. What do I mean by that? If you walk, you keep quiet for a bit, because then you have a natural pause. It gives the audience also some time to think about what you're saying. It gives yourself some time to breathe and to really be present. Because silence is very powerful. Think about that. Silence can bring some balance and some, you feel you don't hurry up too much. And also your audience needs time to think. If you talk really fast all the time, the audience cannot follow what you're saying and they maybe lose track, and also you get out of breath. So it's really important also to find those moments in your story, make clear choices. For a TEDx talk, we really always say, learn it by heart. Some speakers find that very difficult because they say, yeah, but my story is difficult or is different every time, and I like to be spontaneous and all these kind of things. I am also dealing with speakers like that. This is always very difficult for a speaker's coach, because the thing is, when you're on stage, you might forget half the story, half of your presentation, because you are not a professional, and everybody has that. Also professionals actually have that. Everybody is more nervous than normal, so that means that your brain works differently, and you have to realize that. So it's much easier, much more easier for yourself if you just learn it, because then you can make the choices like, where do I stand, where do I walk to, where do I have a pause. Pauses are super effective. Listen, for instance, to talks of Obama, previous talks of Obama. He was a master in these kind of things. He was a master of having eye contact. He could have a speech for 15,000 people, and everybody on that square, in that audience, felt like Obama was talking to him or her personally. That's because how he held his body, how he was addressing to left and right, and in that way he addressed everybody in the whole audience. He moved his hands. It's a very important thing to look at good speakers and to learn from them. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Meg. Thank you. Neuroscience for speakers. I mentioned it already a little bit, and one of the things that is important is stories. Stories enhance mirror neurons. We feel with the story, we feel, we go on the journey with you. Another thing is that when we were children, we loved stories. So when we hear a story, it's almost like you feel like a child again, because you enjoy that somebody is telling you a story. So it's a very nice tool to take people with you and to make them part of what you have to say. Another thing is that we can call that is actually directing this neuroscience part is engaging with body language. And moving forward, when you have something personal to tell, use your arms, really engages the audience. And of course, the tone of voice does that as well. Good. The next, please. Yeah, I want to give you some advice. So which talks you should really watch and where you learn a lot. For instance, Amy Cuddy, she talks a lot about body language. In her talk, Body Language Shapes Who You Are, she teaches us how body language does not only influence others, but also how your own body language influences yourself. So that's a very interesting one. Because if you don't feel confident, we usually feel that in our body. And that makes that we may feel, you make yourself small, your shoulders start to hang. Be aware of that. Because if you don't do that, if you do the opposite, then your body tells you, hey, I can do this. I am confident. So it's something that you can train yourself to do in order to be more confident. Simon Sinek is a very good talk, actually a TEDx talk, Start With Why. It's not a TED talk, but a TEDx talk. So it means that he also started on a smaller stage. Start With Why. He really explains why the why part is so super important. Jill Bolte Taylor, I really love that one. It's already a bit of an oldie, but I really like that talk. She is actually a neuroscience, and she got a stroke. And in this stroke, the way she talks about it is like, it's almost like a performance. I almost see this as a monologue, because she is really into the story. And the way she tells it, it's like, oh my God, you really can feel with her. You can see what she saw when she had that stroke. And what she also does, and I didn't talk about that yet, is what she did is she brings a human brain on stage. She holds it in her hands. My God. Because look at if you can have a prop, something that you can use, something that really draws the attention of the people, something that really like, oh, so in this, with this really a human brain that she held in her hands, is something, a sight that you never forget. Let's move on. Thank you. Now you might think, oh my gosh, I'm not like that. I cannot hold a talk, and I really, all these things, like, I feel insecure to speak on stage. I'm afraid not to be taken serious. I'm afraid to go off. I'm insecure about the structure of the story. I'm afraid to be boring, and I'm afraid to look stupid. I can totally relate to all that as well, because I have been there. Next slide, Meg. I really had that too. What if I told you that I used to be a very shy farmer's daughter, and my mom told me always that when I was 3 years old, I lived in a very remote village. If there was a stranger coming up to our front door, I was so afraid that I would start to cry. And I still remember giving a lecture at high school. Oh my God, what a nightmare that was. I would not sleep at night. I would get a red face. I would stutter. I would lose my story. I had all that. I had that all too. But I did something that not everybody does, and I don't say that you have to. I went to acting school. Next slide. And I went to acting school because I wanted to learn to be more confident. And here you see me again in Shakespeare's Women as Titania of Midsummer Night's Dream. You might know the play. And you see that, especially when you play a role, it's so much easier. So I really found the way through acting school, doing the things that I was really most afraid of. I got over it, and I learned something there that I want to share, that I'm sharing with you now, because performance tools are really very helpful. Next slide. Performance tools are so helpful for speakers because it makes you confident. It really helps you to shine on stage, so you will be taken serious. And it helps you to connect to the audience. It's not rocket science. It is actually, they are very simple tools that actors use and that are so well applicable also for people who want to speak. Knowing how to connect to the audience, knowing how to engage with your body language and your use of voice, that is something that can be done. Next slide. So I have that passion. I have that passion especially to help women to get your voice be heard. I know how important it is to let your voice be heard. I have been there, being someone not daring to speak up, being afraid to be noticed. But I also knew, I felt that I was not happy with that situation. And I managed with going to acting school, with doing theater, to get out of it. And then I realized, my God, if I can do it, everybody can do that as well. And I know if you are someone who wants to share your story and share your insights, maybe you went through something and you just made a fresh start. Maybe you just started a new business. Or maybe you just feel like someone who says, okay, now it's time to go out there, to really speak up. Next slide. I give you an invitation. And the invitation is for a one-to-one clarity call. Because I think it is very important for everyone to see what is your personal goal in speaking. I mean, I give you with this webinar, I gave you already quite some value, I think, and how to get into a TED Talk, finding a way on how to structure your story, how to use that in a presentation, how to use your body language, how to use presentation skills. But I think if I talk to you in a more personal level, then I can give you maybe even some more value. I really want to give you some more advice on how to get to the speaker stage. And that's why I give you an invitation for a free clarity call to see if that is what you need. Not that you have to get something, because I do have a special offer, of course, but it's also to see where you are and if you need something. Next slide. As I said, I have a special offer. I have an e-learning toolkit, which gives you a lot of value, because you can use it whenever, forever, whenever you need it. And that is on how to use storytelling techniques in a TED Talk, how to structure a presentation, how to use neuroscience in connecting to your audience, and how to apply to it to speak at a TED event. Next slide. And more, because balancing techniques are super important. I have been meditating for like 25 years, and I see and I feel how that helps me to be more balanced. And I share these techniques with speakers that I coach, because everybody is nervous, everybody feels super excited, and it is about how to deal with that and how to control your nerves. No, acknowledge that it is there, that your nerves are there, but you can balance them. And again, it's not rocket science. I'm really a person who likes simple and clear. For me, all these techniques are simple and clear techniques that is everybody can use that. And that's why I'm so enthusiastic in sharing this with you. All right, my international stage presence method is to be and to talk on stage in a lively, authentic way with full use of your presence, with full use of your body language, and with a strong voice that speaks to the heart of your audience. Next slide. How can you do that? Well, I have that toolkit, which consists of a document with practical tools, with a lot of techniques. I also have film and video material, so you can really see and see how it is, how you can use it, and having examples. So that is really something that is so practical and that you can always go back to. Next slide. And that is very important because I work on a very personal level. I offer you 3 online private coaching sessions so that you can achieve your personal goal, becoming a TEDx speaker. I find it super important to really do that on a personal level, to really see where you are, what you need, and to dive into that. And it's very good to do that also online. Sorry about the 2 onlines in that presentation. And suddenly see. Next one. I say not for everyone because I can imagine that that is not what you need at this moment. That you say, okay, thank you so much for this webinar. It gave me a lot of insights, and that is all what I need at that moment, at this moment. I totally understand that. That is totally fine. But I can also imagine that you think, oh gosh, this is the starting point and I need more. I really want to go deeper. I want to take the next step in my speaking career. And I have to say I take only 10 people for that personal guidance because for me it's very intense and I find it super important to be able to give a lot of personal value and personal advice. And that's why for now I have to say, okay, I can take maybe 10 people. I know there were 87 people signing up for this webinar. That's why I thought, okay, let's do the clarity call so that everybody can talk to me. We talk for 30 minutes on Zoom and we can see where you are. Where are you? What do you want? What do you need? Maybe you don't need something. Maybe you don't need something right now and you want to take it to another moment, to later in time. That's totally fine. Next slide. So the value for this whole package, the online toolkit and online coaching, it's $16.90, 100 euros. Special price for the WEConnect webinar attendees is $14.90. But if you register within 24 hours for the clarity call, you can claim your spot for only $11.90. And that means that you can, if you claim your spot, doesn't mean that you have to take it. That means that we have the clarity call, you register within 24 hours, you send me an email that you want that, and then you already claim your spot. For instance, if you want it, if you want that spot, if you want to get all this coaching and the online toolkit, then you pay only this. Doesn't mean that you have to. It's just to ask you to register fast, and also because of this, the thing that I can only take 10 people at this moment. Otherwise, it's just too much for me. And I'm really curious to talk to you and to see also where your needs are and what you like and where you stand. So that's why I invite you for that. Next slide, please. So I want to thank you so much for attending this webinar, my webinar, How to Talk Like a TEDx Speaker. And I'm really curious to hear your questions.
Adda, thank you so much. And so just to clarify then at the end, the offer that making, if people want to have a call with you to find out more about your wider program, they can get in touch and do a free a free consultation?
Absolutely. They can get in touch to me. We talk for half an hour. It is totally free. So if you are interested, send me an email. And no obligations. It's just to find out also where people stand, where you are. As I said, I'm very passionate, especially in also helping women to get on the stage, as I have found out that also high educated women, the moment they get on stage, when we get on stage, we are so conditioned somehow.
Yeah.
And being charming and that does not help us to be powerful.
No, I understand. Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing some of your expertise and insight around, well, being a TEDx speaker, but being generally a good speaker as well. I've just got a few kind of logistical questions, and please, if you've got questions, please do use the chat functionality. Just going back to one of your earlier comments about how you actually find the TEDx events. Halina's mentioned in the comments box that there's an upcoming event, and she's going to share the link with that. I had a little look online and searched the TEDx website, and I can see, I just looked at the UK and I can see there's upcoming events. Is that where you find them? But you also said, actually, by the time you see a TEDx event advertised, they've probably already got their speakers sorted. So I didn't quite understand where you could see, is there a central database of events you can apply to speak at?
Yes, you can actually go to the TEDx website and find where the event page is, and then you can look at where events are for the rest of the year, or maybe even the coming year. Because if you want to speak somewhere, indeed, you have to apply early. You cannot wait until, indeed, like a month before is already quite late. So
no, I can understand. I know that when we're planning our events, it's really
it's the same, of course. Yeah, I understand that. So so but that is the main eye opener I think I found in this is that you can apply anywhere. I mean, nobody says you can't. The only thing is that we expect that maybe you have to be invited, or if there is no application form on the website, you cannot apply. Yes, you can. They're very much open in finding new people and finding new speakers, because also the organizers, they also like to make discoveries. Like, I discovered this great speaker on this subject, or she is really interesting because she comes from that background, or whatever. Look at also from that point of view. They also need new people.
Yeah. Okay, and then just thinking about it, is one of the kind of the given rules about being a TEDx speaker is that you can't talk with any notes?
What do you mean with notes? No, you don't really have your notes. What you can have a bit of a PowerPoint, a bit of slides, but usually these slides are very visual. So like nice photos or stuff. So indeed, it is quite important to have your presentation learned. That's I've never. That is totally not something that is done to have notes there. Yeah.
No. Okay. That was just one of my thoughts. So listen, ladies, if you've got any questions that you would like to ask Adda about being a TEDx speaker or speaker generally, please do use the chat functionality. I know Susanna just made a comment about she had maybe seen at some events that speaking slots often go to sponsors, but I know earlier on you said that certainly for TEDx events that they don't pay, or I don't know, have you seen any experience of that? I mean, are they open to everybody, or do you maybe need to be involved in sponsoring an event?
No, I don't understand what she means, but because TEDx events, we never pay speakers. This is all voluntary. And definitely people who are speaking are not sponsors.
Okay.
As far as I know.
Would there be a difference between a TEDx event and a TED event?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, fine. Maybe it's that, Suzanne. Maybe it's that, and I think you said that in your note as well. So thank you for that. And then
no, but here I see a note that but speakers sometimes pay to speak, not for TEDx. There are events where, as a speaker, you have to pay. You might have your doubts on the quality of that event, because then it's not about the quality of the speaker, but are you willing to pay the money?
Oh, interesting, yeah.
But at TEDx, nobody pays and nobody gets any money.
Okay, great. Thank you, Adda, and thank you for the question, Suzanne. I know certainly the culture in this, certainly in the work that we do here, would be, maybe normally pay a speaker rather than ask the speaker to pay. Okay, and then I've got a couple of questions myself, but if anybody does have more questions for Adda, please do use the chat functionality. Obviously TEDx is one type of public speaking, but do you have your biggest fear of speaking in public and what might go wrong? I don't know if you can kind of share any insight on your own experiences.
Because indeed that was my question for the group. You know what? Once when I was an actor on stage, I totally lost my lines. I had a complete blackout. And there I experienced on the spot how true it is that your body knows where it is, because my brain was totally blank. The only thing that I remembered that I had to get up from the chair I was sitting and had to cross over the stage to the other side, and there I had to say something. But the only thing I remembered was that I had to stand up and move over to that corner in a completely state of, okay, I do this and I don't know what I'm going to do after. But the fun part was when I was there, I remembered.
Okay.
I was again back. So I thought, wow, afterwards, I thought, wow, this was actually very interesting. At the moment, it was not interesting at all. It was like, I have no clue what's happening now. But it was brilliant, actually, because I also realized that I was so much in the moment during my walk. Maybe that part was the best part of the whole play, because I couldn't think about anything else. Usually your brain is like, okay, what comes next? Mm-hmm. But I wasn't like that at all, because, as I said, I was totally blank. And I think that is what we usually have. I mean, we are so much afraid that you lose your lines, especially at a TEDx event, for instance, where you cannot have any notes, etc. It doesn't really matter, because it doesn't matter if something comes out differently than you have thought of. Everybody loses something in the presentation. There's always less. The thing is, if it's a real performance, it's maybe 80% of what you rehearsed. In quality, in the things that you do with your hands, or the things that you have thought of beforehand. So know that, and be relaxed about that it is like that.
Okay.
Nobody's perfect. What can you do? We all try, but it will never work out. Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you. And Halina shared the link to the TEDx Bristol website, and you can find their portal there. So thank you, Halina. Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else have any other questions that they would like to ask Adda? Please do use the chat functionality. And I've got a couple of questions myself, and some that were submitted in advance as well. We asked at the beginning the experience that people in the webinar already had about public speaking. There was a mix. Most people said yes, we have done some type of public speaking already. From your background in acting, apart obviously the kind of the stage presence and that kind of moving around and luring and coming forward to the audience, I just wondered if there were any other kind of acting techniques that could be used in normal kind of business presentations?
Well, I think everything is connecting, isn't it? I mean, the way we connect with our audience. What I usually say is, you can be a brilliant actor and knowing all the techniques and being wonderful in reciting Shakespeare or something, but still you can be not interesting. And I think it's all about being connected. And what acting taught me is how to be really connected, how to be really there on stage, which is also being vulnerable, but also kind of be okay with that. Because if you're vulnerable, then the audience feels that and can also, open up their hearts. And I think that is something that's maybe the most important thing.
Okay, great. I've got a few thank yous coming through on the chat function, but not any questions. So I'm going to close with one final question just in the last couple of minutes. what is your favorite TED Talk? Because I know you can go onto the TED website and you can look at any of them. There's hundreds and hundreds of different talks that you can watch. You reference some that are quite well known in your slide, but I wondered if you had a favorite TED Talk too.
Those three are really my favorites that I mentioned, just because they are so true and also very, very, giving a lot of insights in in what we need as speakers.
Yeah.
Especially the one of the neuroscience, Jill. She is she's not a professional speaker, but the way she does it, it's really like, I was really thinking, maybe that is my most favorite one. I thought, wow, this is so brilliant. You can actually make a play out of it. So interesting what she has to say, and also the way she is also very vulnerable by sharing what she went through, and that's very beautiful.
Great. Fantastic. Well, we can certainly look for them. So, Adda, thank you so much for presenting for us. I'm going to close just before hold on, there's just a couple of quick questions come in. Is there a question?
Inventing what investing.
This time the public is not. Sandra, I'm not sure if that's a question, but I'll come back to that separately. I don't think it's actually.
I also don't know what.
Okay. No, that's fine. Well, listen, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for dialing in. We'll share the recording and the slides as well. And if you would like to talk to Adda to maybe get a bit more insight into how she might be able to help you further, if this is an area of interest for you, please do get in touch. Her contact details, we will share them in the follow-up email, and also we'll reference this email in different newsletters and things like that. But if you do have any questions or you want to find out more, please get in touch with Adda directly. And Adda, a big thank you from me and from WEConnect International for sharing your expertise and knowledge today with some of the other women-owned businesses. So thank you very much.
It was my pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity, Maggie.
You're very welcome. Thanks very much, everybody.